There's a widely held myth in science that if your scientific experiment agrees with your theory, then your theory is true or proven. And they use words like confirmed or true or proven or final or correct or validated. Or my favorite one, the science is settled. And I'm going to show you that this is the furthest thing from the truth, ironically. And when I get done at the end, you're going to have a whole new meaning and understanding of what truth is, especially with regard to science. And I'm going to show you at the end that the truth in science is completely meaningless. And I'm going to show you that with a simple experiment. This is what's known as a homopolar generator. This here is a disk magnet. The green is the north, red is the south. This is a conducting copper disk. The magnet can rotate and the disk can rotate. This is a closing path, which would ostensibly have a voltmeter here that can be read. And this closing path can rotate as well. I've attached a ball to the magnet to make it easier to see when the magnet's rotating. Let me rotate the magnet now. Okay, let me rotate the disk. And that ball is there to let you see that the disk is rotating. The closing path, you can see that rotating as well. So depending on what pairs of stuff you have moving, you're going to get different results read at the voltmeter in the closing path. So let's look at what all the theories say about this homopolar generator. We call this the paradox 1 experiment in ethereal mechanics. So let me get this out of the way and show you. This is what classical theory. The E here means this is how the classical theory is interpreted by Einstein. In Einstein, his version says you have to move the magnetic field with the magnet as the magnet rotates. And then you have classical as interpreted by Heaviside, where the magnetic field is static with result to the experiment. Then you have new electromagnetism version 3, which also gets all the same answers. Okay, again, this is the measured classical as interpreted by Einstein, classical interpreted by Heaviside, new electromagnetism version 3, and version 5. And they all get the same answers. Over here, this shows you the checkbox settings. This is when the magnet's moving, this is green when the disk is moving, and this is green when the closing path is moving. So there's 8 different modes of operation of this experiment, and these show the results for each mode. Now, this is the point where a classically trained STEM person would say, well, if you're getting all the same answers, then all the theories must be fundamentally the same and derived from one underlying model. That is not true, except in the case here that new electromagnetism version 3 and classical H share one common point, and that point is the part that explains this experiment. So in the next slide, I'm going to put those together because they do give the same answers, because they share the same model for that particular part that explains the homopolar, also known as a paradox 1. Now here, the little 4 is clipped off the end here because of the minus sign, but that would be 394. That is just a Excel formatting thing. So those 0.0039s are really 0.00394s, or the negative ones. Okay, now what we're doing here is, in order to find the total in simulation, we have to compute the effect on the disk and the effect on the closing path, and then we add those together to get the totals. And you can see that each of the different model sets get different results. And someone says, oh, all you have to do is measure the disk or the closing path. No, you can't do that. No one knows how to do that. If you can come up with a way to do that in such a way that physicists would agree that your method is valid, I might even pay money for that. But it doesn't really matter, because we're going to eventually eliminate the bogus models here through other means. The point here is that these models give us the same answers for at least what we can measure. This is why Karl Popper said, No number of positive outcomes at the level of experimental testing can confirm a theory to be true. But a single counterexample can show a theory to be false. And this is why you can never prove scientific theories true. And so all these scientists stating all this nonsense about, oh, we know the truth, this is the irrefutable model, blah, 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 that is all nonsense. So let me introduce this video before we go any further. This is Distinti's Rules of Scientific Acquisition, video number 2, and this is the version 5 of those rules. In this second video, we're going to talk about why the truth is meaningless in science. And our effigy of the truth is justice. Justice is blind, and I like how AI did it, kind of like an avenging angel. And in this video, we're going to cover rule of acquisition 1, 3, 4, 5, 11, 32, and 35. And we'll talk about them all in order. Not necessarily in numerical order. So let me give you another example of why we can never prove a theory true. Because let's say these measurement points here, these blue dots are your measurement points from your experimental apparatus. And the yellow line represents the mathematical model that you're going to fit to that data. Oh, it looks very clear that they're all on a horizontal line, that your theory is very simple. It's just going to be a straight line fit of that data. But this is where Mother Nature can really mess with your mind, because there can be a completely different mathematical model that fits those measurement points. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll just increase my footprint in the universe and increase my sampling density of my instrument to see, because if I take a point here, I'll know which one of these it is. So you improve your sampling density. You're like, aha, it's the sine wave that fits the experimental data. But you think you're done, you're wrong, because Mother Nature can still find another model that fits that data. And that's why it's impossible to prove a theory true. Unless now, so the way you say, well, I'll just take another data point. Oh, okay, well, that one disproves both of the models if the data point's truly where the red dot is. But now you have a conundrum, because the only way you can eliminate the only way you can reduce this down to there only being one model that fits the data is to take your data at infinite density and take all your data from minus infinity to plus infinity. So therefore you need an infinite footprint of data to be able to reduce the possible models that can fit your data down to 1. You can only get to 1 when you consider an infinite footprint. We talked about footprint in the last video. Again, to prove a model true, that this is the only explanation of a given phenomenon in nature, requires an infinite footprint, perfect measurement precision, no experimental error, infinite sample density, knowledge of the behavior of the model under all conditions that exist in the universe, from the beginning of the universe to the end of the universe, from the beginning of time to the end of time. And because that is not possible, you will never be able to prove a model true. And going back, we're going to show you the definitions again. An empirical model is a model based on measured data and observations. It doesn't care about a theory. It doesn't care about a mechanism. It's only a mathematical model that fits the data. And basically, an empirical model is monkey see, monkey do. We've been doing empirical modeling since the beginning of mathematics thousands of years ago. Okay, and we have separated science, the theoretical model and the scientific. We no longer say theory now. What we say is theoretical model or empirical model. So we don't say theory, we say model now. We don't use the term law anymore, because that gives the false impression that, like when you say law of gravity or the law of this, it gives the false impression that we know stuff that exists throughout the universe. We don't. All of our measurements are made on the tiny little scum layer of the earth. And we cannot assume that what works here works everywhere else. That is a fallacy. That is called the... we'll get to it. I forgot what it is offhand. Again, our theoretical models, we try to come up with an underlying mechanism that explains why the model is true, and try to use that to infer what's going on under the areas that we don't know that we can't see under yet. So that is the Mendeleev technique that we discussed in the previous video. Please watch that. We have a lot more definitions there. And again, going back to Karl Popper, no number of positive outcomes at the level of experimental testing confirm a theory to be true, but a single counterexample can show a theory to be false. Scientific models can't be proven true. Even Albert Einstein agrees with this. He has said, no amount of experimentation can prove me right. A single experiment can prove me wrong. Again, scientific models cannot be proven true. They can only be proven wrong. Well, they can be proven useful. And we'll explain that in a moment. So this is the correct answer fallacy. This is the first rule of acquisition. And this is the first rule for a reason. Okay, we cannot prove anything true. The only thing we can prove with correct answers is that our model has utility. And that utility is what we're going after. That is what allows us to expand our footprint in the universe. Okay, the models don't have to be true to expand our footprint. We can get utility even from wrong models. We do that all the time. We still say in navigation, the sun rises in the east and settles in the west. But even though we know that that's a wrong model, it's still useful. Okay, but again, these scientists seem to know this because they talk in terms of proved right again, new evidence proved Einstein wrong. Oh, well, okay, then why aren't we? If we proved Einstein wrong, why aren't we throwing out relativity? Because if you prove it wrong, it's wrong, or either wrong or you got to adjust it. Einstein confirmed the Webb telescope revealed an unexpected void in the early universe. Wait a minute, this is bullshit. If it's unexpected, then Einstein didn't predict it. So how is Einstein confirmed? This is gibberish. Okay, you can read that, I know. So again, the definition of a true model is a theoretical model that explains a natural phenomena exactly the way nature does it. Sounds simple, but it's impossible. I'm going to show you another example of why it's impossible. Let's talk about the shape of the earth. People say, oh, the shape of the earth, we have direct observation. We know the shape of the earth. Oh, do we? Let's show how we evolved the shape of the earth. So 5,000 years ago, we had a very small footprint on the earth. And because our footprint didn't extend too far, we believed that the earth was flat. It made sense. Then as our technology expanded to about 1000 AD and telescopes were invented so that we could see over the horizon a distant ship, its bottom part of the ship is hidden below the curvature of the earth, we started believing that the earth was round. And then as our surveying improved, we began to believe now the earth was ellipsoid. And now that we have satellites that can take very precise radar maps of the earth, we realize now that the earth is basically an amalgam of ellipsoid shells that roughly form. Now this is exaggerated, but this kind of gives you the idea here. But worse, so you think, oh, now we have a perfect understanding of the earth. No, it gets worse because we have plate tectonics going on and we have erosion and weather and all that other stuff. The surface of the earth is constantly changing. So we'll never know the true shape of the earth. The best we can hope for is a useful approximation that will at least allow us to navigate and build structures with enough confidence. You get the idea. Now, there's another way we can go with this and say, oh, look, check out the coastline paradox. What's the truth about what's the coastline of England? Well, it depends on what you define the truth to be. So there could be hundreds of different truths, hundreds of different explanations of how long the coast. Check this out on your own. It'll blow you away that we cannot even know the truth on something we can directly observe. If we can't know the truth on something we can directly observe, how are we supposed to know the truth on something we have to infer, like electromagnetism or gravity and any of that stuff? We can't. The best we can hope for is that we have our models early on, and as time goes on, we can slowly chip away at the errors, find new counterexamples to help us improve the models, and then over time, we will chip out the error and hopefully one day converge on what would be the truth. Okay, technological progress is the replacement of wrong models with more subtly wrong models. Because our models will always be wrong, they'll never be true. And because we can never know the truth, the best we can hope for, models are sufficiently good approximations that they are useful, that they have utility. And from that, we can expand our footprint in the universe. So a definition of a wrong model is a model that gets the wrong answer. And I had AI knew this. This is pretty cool. It's basically doing archery practice in our laboratory. None of the arrows hit the damn target. Perfect, you know. So we get to the fifth rule of acquisition, the truth trap. The illusion that we think we know the truth is an extinction level event. Because if we think we know the truth, we will stop questioning nature. We'll stop searching for the more improved model. We'll stop searching for the truth. And that's the irony of science. It's a search for the truth that we can never find and never know. But ultimately, as we keep reducing our error, one day we might converge on the truth, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But we should never assume that we know the truth, because the greatest obstacle to technological progress is the illusion that we know the truth. Now, I really wanted to have the picture for this to be the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, luring in physicists into his child catcher wagon by saying, "Ooh, come and get your Nobel Prizes, come and get your tenure and your grant funding for your new things." But I tried to have AI do that, but AI had no concept of the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So I settled for the Hansel and Gretel candy house with two people in lab coats and clipboards eyeing it out. So that's my truth trap logo for the fifth rule of acquisition. So why is this important? Because we have all of our eggs on one basket, one planet. We are one nuclear war, one major plague, one mega asteroid impact, one mega supervolcano away from an extinction event. An extinction event that is coming. Go ask the dinosaurs. And what my calculations are, in order to save the human race, we got to be able to move a significant population off, and we need to go to other planets that are blue or that can be turned blue. And in order to do this, we need to break the light barrier by at least a factor of 500, or we might as well just kiss our ass goodbye. Just push all the buttons right now and just off ourselves. Okay, 500C is the absolute minimum that we need in order to have multiple planets out there that could support each other. Let's say you have a crop failure on one world because of a plague or an infestation. Well, you need to have help from another planet, and that has to be no more than 3 months away in order for you to save the population on another planet. But scientists say, well, but it's impossible to go faster than the speed of light. Really? Do you know how wrong these physicists have been time and time again? In 1900, Lord Kelvin said heavier than air flight's an impossibility. Has he ever looked out his window to see what birds are doing? And then a few years later, the Wright brothers flew with heavier than air flight. And then they believed the sun was a big burning ball of anthracite, because they didn't know anything else that could cause heat or light. Then when fusion and fission came along, they said, oh yeah, the sun's a big ball of fusion. I guarantee you that's not right either. See, we imprint upon our theories what we know now. And I guarantee you, ethereal mechanics is going to show you something that's a whole order of magnitude more powerful than fission and fusion. And that is going to be more of a part of what the sun is doing. And that means the sun's a lot older than we think. And then the physicist model said, well, trains can't go faster than 40 miles an hour, otherwise all the air will siphon out and the people suffocate. Well, engineers did it. We had no problems. Okay, if physicists were right today, we'd have a unified field theory. We don't have a unified field theory, so physicists can't possibly be right about anything. We can't assume that they're right about anything. Again, that's the truth trap. And today they can't explain spiral shapes of galaxies. They can't explain the winding issues of galaxies. They can't explain illogical star speeds at different distances from central core. They can't explain why the majority of orbits are circular, why everything orbits the same way around the central mass. They have no idea where the constant G comes from. You can see electrogravity for our explanation of where G comes from. They balk at perpetual motion machines, but their models of the atom are perpetual motion machines, and their first law of motion describes perpetual motion. They can't unify anything. And people say, well, they've unified electricity, magnetism. No, ethereal says, no, there's no unification there. We have a different explanation that electricity is a synthesis of magnetism. We have a different explanation. Does our explanation the true one? Who knows? We can't know. Again, we're going to keep on trying to find new, better models and reduce the error. So we should never trust that anything we know is the truth, because that will lead to an extinction level event. I mean, one day we may actually converge on the truth. I mean, as we keep pulling down the error of our model, we may actually touch it. But there's no difference in the utility. I mean, by using the normal technological advancement methods, our model may actually reflect the true underlying mechanism of nature. So by saying it's true now, do we get any more utility out of it? The answer is no. So it doesn't benefit us to say we know the truth. There's no value in it. And this is why the truth means nothing at all, because we're going to get there, hopefully, just by using normal technological advancement processes, by continually reducing the errors as we find counterexamples, or as the rules of acquisition say, this can't be true for this particular reason. Okay, it is safer to have the truth and not know it than to assume the truth and not have it. And that is the next part of the last part of the truth trap. So the imperative here is technological advancement, utility. In other words, useful models that will help us develop machines to expand our footprint in the universe so that we can finally bump into the counterexamples that will again help us further the advancement of science. Improving the utility of the existing model is the primary objective toward deferring our extinction. Quicker we get off this planet, then we can go on to other things like figuring out where the universe came from, where it's going. Right now, we are on borrowed time for the next extinction level event. And the extinction level events are always on their way. Again, it's silly to speculate on the life cycle of the universe. In other words, where the universe came from and how the universe is going to die. We don't have time for that. We need to be able to figure out how to get people off this planet before the planet dies. The death of the planet is going to come before the death of the universe. So our priority should be on that and stop wasting time on trying to figure out the life cycle of the universe. Yes, the death of the universe is going to be the last extinction level event we're going to have to worry about. So we got some time on that. Let's not waste time on that. So the utility fallacy, again, we should not be blinded that just because our models can produce these excellent things like radios and cell phones and computers and LCD graphic displays and all this stuff, that we actually know what we're doing. We've shown a great potential of just doing monkey see, monkey do engineering to develop technology. I demonstrated a lot of that in the previous video. And again, technological marvels do not indicate that we have carnal knowledge of nature's true mechanisms. Now, for the next two, these actually come together, the irrefutability fallacy and the uniqueness fallacy. The symbol for this is Highlander, there can be only one. The uniqueness fallacy is where scientists believe that there can only be one model in the universe, and when they have that model and they believe it's irrefutably, it can be the only model. And that's why these two have to come together. This arises out of my graduate thesis in 2007. I developed a new model of induction in the 1990s, and I finally got around to using it for my graduate thesis to predict the inductance of printed circuit board traces to a higher level of precision than anybody was able to do before, and being sandwiched between both 1 and 2 copper conductive planes, or ground planes if you want, power planes. And I'm the only one who was able to do that from all the research that I saw. Now, when it came time to do the graduate defense, the dean of the School of Engineering finally found out about this, and he had a conniption. He ordered me into his office to lecture me that Maxwell's equations are irrefutable. Now, I was coached to be nice, because my answer would have been, if I was not under constraints, would have been, well, then obviously you haven't used Maxwell's equations anywhere outside of a textbook. I mean, they get good answers, but I can show you many places where Maxwell's equations are refutable. But let's assume that that's not the case. Let's say within the realm of science that there are no counterexamples for what we know. Okay, so if they're irrefutable, why are you making this statement? Because it doesn't mean there's not another model that fits, but that's not what scientists believe. They believe if they have an irrefutable model, it can be the only model. It is unique, and that's what uniqueness means. This concept of irrefutable means unique is a contamination from mathematics. Part of requiring uniqueness is infinite precision. And let me explain what I mean by infinite precision or accuracy. Okay, the large blue dots here represent that this measurement sample isn't perfect. In other words, our instruments gave us this point here, but the real value is somewhere here. There could be error in both this dimension and error in the measurement in this dimension. Now, typically in scientific papers, they use this notation, that is the measurement from the instrument, but the real value can be anywhere here or there. We use this type of representation when we believe that our measurements in this dimension are extremely small. Other people use an oval, where we expect about this much error in this dimension and about that much error in this dimension. So depending on the paper, they can show the measurement in certainly different ways. I'm just showing them as circles. And you can see as if you have a large uncertainty circle here, there's a lot of possible ways you could put a line between those 2 points because you don't really know where the real value is. And so one of the ways to reduce the number of possible explanations of the data is to improve the precision by reducing the error of the measurements. Now, I'm showing that these are the smallest points possible. I have to show a little bit of it so you could kind of see it on the video, but essentially by improving the precision, basically we're going to say infinite precision because there's no error, then only one possible location can exhibit in that point there, and therefore we've reduced the possibilities. But still, we don't have all the measurements in between, and we showed that last time, that if you're, and I assume that these are infinitely small, I'm just showing them big so we can see them. So with just a few sample points and with a lot of empty space in between, okay, we can show that there's multiple models that can fit those points. You see the straight line, you see the low frequency sine wave and the high frequency sine wave. And like we said before, the way that you would reduce the number of models that could pass through those points is to increase the sampling density. Okay, therefore, the way to eliminate the possibility, all the possibilities except one, is to have infinite sampling density. So what we're showing here is we're showing the very small circles so close together that you can't see the humps, but in reality, this would be every single infinite point, and there wouldn't be you wouldn't even see the humps here in actuality. This is just blown up so you can see it. But also, we also would need all of the sampling points to positive infinity and to negative infinity. And that is the only way that we can claim uniqueness. And because only mathematicians can do this, only mathematicians can claim uniqueness. Okay, if as physicists, we would have to know all of the points of the universe, and since the beginning of the universe to the end of the universe, from all time before and all time after, at every point. We will never have that density of data. Okay, and so in mathematicians, the important point about that is uniqueness in mathematicians means that there's no possible other solution than the one solution that fits the data. So this is the mathematician's version of the truth. Because if scientists could claim uniqueness in science, they would have the truth, the only model that could possibly explain a phenomenon. Okay, and so the uniqueness in mathematics is equivalent to the truth in science. And this is unfortunate because physicists have contaminated science with mathematics because they talk like this. They say, maths, I don't like this terminology, is the language of the universe. Math is the language of the universe. And this guy is saying, well, math isn't actually sorcery. That's because a lot of people that are being trained that the nature will follow your theories. I'm going to have an example of that in a moment. And that our theories are responsible for the outcomes in nature. It's almost like if you get the equation right, nature's going to do what you ask, just like if you were Harry Potter getting your magical expression and your magic wand motion right. It's amazing how they talk in that way, and that's why this guy is saying math isn't actually sorcery. So getting back to uniqueness for a moment, okay, in order to claim uniqueness, okay, mathematicians have infinite number of dimensions in math. So in other words, a mathematician can consider a system of infinite dimensions, where the universe is only about a dozen dimensions, depending on which physicist you talk to. So there's no way we're getting an infinite footprint in dimensions. And also, we've only been really observing the universe for about 200 years with any real level of precision. And so we do not have the ability to say we know what came from at the beginning or how it's going to end. Our extent in the universe is only the scum layer on the earth. We have very little knowledge of what's going on at the edges of the universe, and to a large extent in between. A lot of the times when they say this is a law, a universal law, we don't know that. We haven't been anywhere else in the universe to verify that it's true everywhere. And so it's unfortunate, like I said, that the uniqueness theorem has been used to contaminate science because mathematicians believe that math is the language of the universe. So they're trying to claim uniqueness for black holes here, which is really unfortunate. In order to be able to say that their black hole theory is irrefutable and there can be no other way to explain black holes, okay, that is complete nonsense. We're nowhere near even having any ability to claim uniqueness. Uniqueness should stay in mathematics, okay, because uniqueness essentially means we know the truth. And like I've said before, we should never, ever assume we know the truth. Okay, so mathematics is not the language of the universe. It is a tool that we humans have devised to mimic the world around us in order to attempt to predict outcomes. Yes, we try to use math to predict outcomes, like when we measure the orbit of an asteroid to see if it'll one day eventually hit Earth, or we try to predict the weather, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so it's very useful, but it does have flaws. For example, math is continuous. That's the only way you can get infinite sampling density. Nature is discrete by all accounts of all the physicists because we have quantum mechanics, which says matter and energy are discrete. They have quanta. So, there's a lot of things you have to do when trying to model a discrete universe using a continuous mathematics. And again, math has infinite dimension, nature about a dozen. So the footprint of the universe is only a subset of the footprint of mathematics. So uniqueness from a mathematical standpoint is impossible. And since uniqueness is impossible, we should expect a plurality of models that can explain the universe precisely within the level of the data that we presently have. And it may never, ever be possible to know which of them are true. And we're going to talk more on that in the rules of acquisition, because in rule of acquisition 33, we have a final test. I came up with a way to possibly detect or test which model is the true model. I'm not saying it's a perfect test, but it's close. I think it's something interesting that should be pondered. Okay, now getting back to how we talk about that math is not sorcery. You have how Einstein's theory fixed Mercury's mysterious orbit. So we're saying that our theories fix nature. How the future is predetermined by our theory. Okay, this is ridiculous nonsense, because if quantum mechanics has a superposition of states that only collapse when you observe them, how can the future be predetermined until we get there to observe the future to collapse the uncertainty? So this just kind of flies in the face of all the crap they've been telling us about quantum mechanics. They do this all the time. They contradict themselves. Okay, and they're saying our theories fix nature. Again, more of the Harry Potter stuff. Our theories fix nature. Okay, something strange happens when you trust quantum mechanics. What if I don't trust quantum mechanics? Do normal things happen? You see the language, the gibberish that they use? Okay, and what I'm going to tell you right now, I've tried to make into a rule of acquisition called the fantasticism tell. Okay, which basically means if something is strange, we don't understand it. If it's too fantastic, if it's too strange, or if we're calling it strange, that means we really don't understand. But it was hard because, you know, what we know now, today, what we may know in the future may be strange. So trying to make a claim for what's strange and not strange was just too objective. But let me explain what I mean by if it's strange, we probably don't understand it. Because back when I was a kid, we'd watch shows like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World or In Search Of, and they would talk about the sailing stones of Death Valley and how these stones mysteriously moved across the desert and no one was ever able to see them move. And all these experts would come up with theories of, you know, electromagnetic vortices and all kinds of UFO encounters and all kinds of ridiculous nonsense. Okay, fantasticisms, if you will. And then when we finally had somebody that actually saw that scientists decided they're going to figure it out, they sat there for 2 years watching these stones until they finally moved. And when they saw them moved, they basically did a face palm. The mechanism by which they moved was so ridiculously stupid and mundane and simple. And it was hysterical watching the human race go from, ooh, it's too strange to possibly even know, to, oh God, it's just simple wind locked in with ice. I will put the links to both of these so you can watch them. Okay, so getting back to the uniqueness fallacy. Uniqueness is not possible because our footprint does not encompass the entire universe over all time. And uniqueness is not possible because the universal footprint is only a subset of the mathematical footprint. Okay, so we should expect multiple correct models to coexist. Now, when I mean correct models, I don't mean true models. I mean models that give us correct answers. Okay, we can get correct answers from models that are just fantasy. We're going to talk about that in the next video. Okay, and then getting back to the irrefutability fallacy. Again, this is kind of a retake, or it's kind of redundant with the fifth rule, which is the truth trap. But I've gotten away from worrying about having redundancy in the rules of acquisition. The more ways that we can show people that, you know, that there's a fallacy going on, it can only help. So 32 point, nothing can be proven true or unique, therefore irrefutability is meaningless. And because irrefutability is essentially truth, truth then is meaningless. Now we're going to talk about the proof by association fallacy. Now in this picture I made from AI, this represents one of these guys that are like traveling salesmen selling beauty products. And they'll always have a beautiful girl saying, look, she uses my beauty products. Look how gorgeous. Don't you want to be just like her? And this is like the same thing with, late night advertisements for wrinkle erasing cream or knee pain reduction using the green lipped muscle and the, all that other stuff you see on late night TV advertisements. Okay, they do it in science as well. On this quantum mechanics video, here, in this video, they discuss all of the quirky stuff of quantum, the stuff I call zombie quantum mechanics. All that stuff after where they buried Schrodinger's cat in the pet cemetery, and the cat came back both alive and dead at the same time, which by definition is a zombie. So they're talking about mostly the strange zombie effects like quantum entanglement, particle wave duality, quantum superposition of states, all that stuff is what they're talking about. But what they do is say because quantum mechanics works so well in the electric semiconductors and all that other stuff, well, it must be true for all the strange stuff. And this stuff here, they use real quantum mechanics, which is a probability distribution, whereas the zombie quantum mechanics is all probability superposition. I'm sorry, those are two very different sciences. And to say that it works for this, that it must also work for that, is very disingenuous. And let me give you an example of why you can't say just because it works for this, it has to work for this other thing over here. Let me give you an example. So you have 5 times 3 is equal to 15. So you can do the inverse process by dividing by 3 to recover the original 5. Well, then that should work here too. Because if I have 5 times 0, which equals 0, then I should be able to divide by 0 to get back to 5. And this is not correct. I should have had a big X over this. Okay, the clear case. Just because it works here does not mean it works here. That's proof by association fallacy. And so so just because it works for one case does not mean it will work for all cases. And we're going to have more about mathematics in later videos. But one of the things added here is, just like in those late night videos, they always have a disclaimer that actual results may vary. So that is a corollary of this. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with two more concepts. We're going to expand the footprint, and then we're going to discuss the Distinti criterion. So we call the homopolar, we call it the PDX1, the paradox 1. We also have the paradox 2, paradox 3, paradox 4 series of experiments. There's a total of 54 different variations of these experiments. Okay, you have one where you only have one magnet, then you have the two magnets, and two magnets with both green side up. So there's 3 variations of the magnets, and there's 3 variations of the pickup coil underneath it. And then there's, I believe, variations in does the center armature or does the coil move with the magnets, because the magnets spin around this axis. So this experimental data expanded our footprint, and we found the counterexamples for classical H and new electromagnetism V3. This was my impetus to go search for new electromagnetism V5. Now somebody's going to say, well, classical E passed all this. Why didn't you just stick with that? Well, because classical E and classical H fail in other ways that we're going to discuss in the next video. So we already have counterexamples for these. Matter of fact, and in another video, I'm going to show a separate video that showed the evolution and how we got to new electromagnetism V5. And I'll show new electromagnetism 1 through 5 in there. But right now, new electromagnetism V5 is the only theory we have that is past the Mendeleev point, and it's the only one that does not fail any of the tells or fallacies of the rules of acquisition. It took me a long time to find something that fit all of that, and all of that will be explained in that video that discusses the evolution of new electromagnetism V5. So in previous videos, in the earlier versions of the rules of acquisition, I came out and I purported the Distinti criterion, which said that we can probably assume that we know the truth if we can travel from one side of the Milky Way galaxy to the other in under 3 months Earth time. And the objective of that would get people to say, well, that would never happen. And that would be my remark, my retort. Well, that's why we should never assume we know the truth. Okay, because the object would be that once we do that, then we can assume we know the truth. And that would be the retort that, well, that's not going to happen. Then we should never assume we know the truth. But as things are going, it looks like we may be able to actually pull that off. And I do not want to be the person that causes stagnation, because people are going to say, well, the Distinti guy said that if we get across the Milky Way galaxy in 3 months, then we know what we're doing. And I do not want to be the cause of stagnation if we actually do, in fact, pull that off. Because our next extinction level event may, in fact, be the collapse of our Milky Way galaxy. And I don't want them to stop only being able to go in the galaxy. We may have to go to a different galaxy. That's a whole order of magnitude higher of a technological challenge. And I don't want the human race to stop because I told them that if you can get across here in 3 months, then you know what you're doing. So I'm retracting or redacting the Distinti criterion. Again, we should never assume we know the truth. Never, ever, 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 ever. Always be challenging what we believe. Always be testing it. Always be looking for counterexamples. We should never rest on our laurels. So what did we learn? We learned that correct answers prove nothing except utility. That monkey do does not mean monkey no. Technological advancement is more important than finding the truth, because the truth we're never going to get to, and it's meaningless in the end, because you're going to develop really good models as you start reducing the error. And if so, you do get the truth. Knowing it's the truth doesn't add any more value to it. It's like if you find that you have $1 million in your bank account, does knowing who put the money there change the fact that you have $1 million in your bank account? Nope. Well, maybe, unless you can find out it's a mistake, but you get the idea. Okay, the greatest obstacle to technological progress is the illusion that we know the truth. It's safer to have the truth and not know it than to assume the truth and not have it. Uniqueness is not possible because our footprint is not infinite, and that should be within the universe. Uniqueness is not possible because the universal footprint is only a subset of the mathematical footprint. And because the mathematical footprint cannot be expanded to the complete extent of the mathematical footprint, because the universal footprint cannot be expanded to the entire extent of the mathematical footprint, we can never claim uniqueness for any of our mathematical models. And we should expect multiple correct models to exist. Again, not true models, correct models that give us correct answers, models that are useful. Maybe one of them is the correct one. Doesn't matter as long as they all give the same answers. Doesn't matter. And nothing can be proven true or unique. Therefore, irrefutability is meaningless. And just because it works for one case does not mean it will work for all cases. Your results may vary. So thank you. To best support this channel and help us break the light barrier so that we can save the human race, please become a Patreon supporter. If I can do this full-time from my Patreon folks, I will do this full-time. I have not taken a vacation since 1999. Every ounce of vacation time, other than spending holidays with family, has been working on this. This is the repository. Please go to the intro video for the YouTube channel. I'll show you the next video. The intro video will show you how to navigate this site to find everything. This is the YouTube channel. You can get there by etherealmechanics.com, or you can go to this Ethereal Mechanics 5658. I think we're up to 1,000 subscribers now. This is the blog site, which is at etherealmechanics.info. Big shout out to Sebastian. I will definitely be able to get more time to place here to interact with folks the minute I can get my JOB. If I can get enough Patreon members, I can do this full time, because right now my JOB is my #1 source of income for this project. My Patreon members have helped out greatly. We've been able to up-level scopes to higher quality instruments because of their support. This is my new end thing made by AI. No more voodoo physics. Thank you very much.